a user by the name of Brian Ziska has asked me a question.
Yes, there's a physical universe, and yes, it functions in a certain way. Does that really, just because there is this universe, this physical structure that operates under certain laws, does that really, say that it's impossible for God to exist? It's gonna work a certain way, and science is merely the understanding of how it works. I don't think it has anything really to do with the nature of how it was created.
Understanding how a universe works now tells you how we got from the past to here. It tells you what the conditions must have been like, what processes could have produced, say, the atomic elements, for example. It tells you much more than you think.
So it's hard for me to understand when you come back to me and say, well, read all these books and science and science and science.
Science means literally knowledge, knowledge, knowledge. That's what the word science means, knowledge. And that's what it's all about. It's you, in your life, accumulating as much knowledge as you can on this subject, if you are genuinely curious about it, and this subject being the universe. I can't put it all into little 10-minute videos. I'd be here forever. And as an atheist, I know I can't be. So it's up to you. The key is science, 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 as in knowledge, knowledge, knowledge. There's no point me talking about scientific facts, every single one that I know, to try and persuade you if you don't know them to be true too. You might think they're just guesses. You have to understand the history of the discoveries and the evidence behind them to understand that these things are pretty factual and have to be taken into account whenever you're thinking about how the universe works or how it came into being. The formation of the snowflake. It's a very mysterious thing. No two snowflakes are the same. They all have a six-pointed aspect to them, but they're all completely different, and they're all complex and symmetrical and beautiful. So in that sense, a single snowflake is rather like the world. There's an order there, surely a design. You know that temperature is the jiggling of atoms. I assume you know that. The energetic movement and vibration of atoms, the higher the temperature, the more the atoms are vibrating and knocking into each other, etc., etc. The lower the temperature, the less of that activity there is. So with a water molecule, or rather with a bunch of water molecules, when the temperature drops, they're able to make weak hydrogen bonds, which results in a six-pointed shape. But essentially what happens is that the jiggling stops and the atoms adopt the configuration that the attractive forces between them have been trying to enforce all along, but they haven't been able to because of the vibrational energy. So it's like nature hits a harmonic and the forces are expressed and we get a snowflake. That's all that's going on down there. Gravity's too weak, the strong force only works in the nucleus. It's just those electrons bonding in those shells of the atoms that results in the snowflake, and that beauty and that complexity and that symmetry and that impression of design. If you play with magnets, that's the force responsible for making a snowflake. The atoms in that molecule do exactly what those forces tell them to do, as if those forces are steel cables holding them in place. What I'm getting at is that the electromagnetic force which forces the atoms in a snowflake to take on that configuration, it's exactly the same force, exactly the same balance of forces that controls every single atom in our bodies. It's no different. Snowflakes are just snowflakes because it's atoms, or rather molecules of one type. We are what we are because it's elements of all different types and the complexity that they can build up, especially when they add to something like carbon. We are made of the same force as the snowflakes. It doesn't vary, it's fixed. No force in nature can make one atom bond to another if it's against the laws of physics, because atoms will only bond in the ways prescribed by the laws of physics. Why propose a God for the creation of something that nature would have produced anyway? It's my certainty about the snowflake, how it works, how it came to exist, going right back to the beginning of the universe. All of those atoms have done exactly what they've been told by the laws of physics. Our understanding of that takes us back to a billionth of a second after a release of energy, and all of the subsequent events are very largely explained. We have a coherent explanation for how we got here, what we are, and why we are the way we are. I don't think that the fact that science can do that is a coincidence. You've read the Bible, you've made conclusions, and then you've built everything else on top. And some of the higher parts of that structure you're still examining, but you're not examining the core beliefs because you've accepted them as true, or at least not falsifiable. And there's a big difference between not falsifiable and true. You say essentially that the existence of science does not preclude the existence of a God. I kind of disagree. I could agree if you said that God doesn't do impossible things, but you're not going to say that, because a God that doesn't do impossible things isn't a God. So if you say that the existence of science doesn't necessarily rule out a God who can do impossible things, although philosophically, technically, you're correct, I think that rationally it's fair to say that's a bit of a stretch. Nothing impossible has ever been seen by science, and science has been looking for the impossible pretty much since it existed. It likes to know the extent of possibility, and if you look at the extent of possibility, you find out where that line is, and over centuries we have learned why that line is there. Every bit of information that we have ripped out of the clutches of our own ignorance, every single thing has shown us that the impossible is impossible. And if God does impossible things, if he's not bound by what is possible, then I say science does contradict that. If something doesn't make sense, we ask questions about it, we investigate it, we get more information, we see if we can make more sense by educating ourselves. And if it doesn't make more sense, then something's wrong with the core belief. It's a fundamental cornerstone of your beliefs that that book is more than a book. If you could see it, if you could question that foundation belief and see it for what it is as a book, that wouldn't preclude God either. I think, in a nutshell, Brian, what I've been trying to explain, and I don't think I've explained it very well, is that there's no room for God, the God of the Bible, to be connected, to have an influence, to even know of our existence. There's nothing he can do. The laws of physics don't allow him, her, it, or them to do anything once the ball is set rolling. If you want to believe that God started the Big Bang, then as far as I'm concerned that's okay, because that won't carry any of the baggage which I find destructive in the biblical Christian religion. If something created this universe, they did it in such a way as to make any further intervention by them impossible, or they had no choice about it. It was this way or no way. Science says all books are written by human beings.